Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. James 1, verse 17. We can praise the Lord for new days, fresh starts. With each day, we have something to be grateful for. So even if your yesterday or week was a struggle or had rough days, we can wake up and feel grateful for all of the good gifts that God has given us. This mountain mint will be put in the dehydrator and we will use for tea. I think this is why I love starting my mornings outside, taking a breath of fresh air and walking the garden. I am trimming my potatoes because I've heard if you trim the flowers, it'll help the tubers grow.
Actually, hosta.
Hosta.
It's a hosta.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah, it is a hosta.
It's a hosta.
Today we went to our local nursery and then we needed to get some things that the nursery didn't have, so we stopped over at Lowe's.
Oh, praise the Lord.
Yay, are those the half-inch ones? This is our second year with this garden, and I've been just so encouraged on how if you do a little bit each year, it builds upon itself, and already this year has felt easier than last year. So we've been trying to build it out. I am preparing lunch for us, so I'm getting arugula and green onions from the garden to pair with canned tuna and mayonnaise and carrots. We went to the nursery first because we wanted to see if they had blueberry plants, and sadly they had all the other berries except for blueberries. We already had 2 blueberry plants and we're creating these rows on our hill. And so when we went to Lowe's, we looked at theirs and they had some on sale. So God provided us with some discounted blueberries that we can add to our blueberry hills. I'm so grateful. So many of you have told me about this moss called usnea, I believe is how you pronounce it. And apparently it is a medicinal plant and you can make a tincture out of it. So I have yet to get to it, but as tree limbs fall from storms, I am just seeing it everywhere, and I think it's so beautiful. You missed out. Often with days in the garden, I like to go ahead and prepare dinner right after lunch by making something that can cook for a while in the oven. And we have a top sirloin roast left, one of the last things from our half cow that we got last year. And so I just did a spice rub on it. Yesterday I had picked all of this thyme from the garden. It was going to flower, and so I trimmed it all. That way it would stop going to flower and keep growing the rest of this garden season. Whenever we do a roast, I love doing it with potatoes and carrots. That's how my mom's always made roasts, and it just is an easy thing to put all together. But we did not have any potatoes, so I was going to get some at the store. I was going to go to the store to specifically get potatoes, but I decided against it, following the Lisa Graham McMinn way of putting limits on yourself. I was like, you know what? I can be content and just use what we have. And we have beets in the garden and we have kale, so I'll do kale chips, beets, and carrots. But I didn't want the beets to stain the meat and the carrots, and just, it would have tasted the same, but I just didn't want to, I don't know, I wanted to separate the beets. So I was like, I'll just cook those later. Went ahead and seared the meat on all sides before putting it in a lower temperature oven so it can slow cook the rest of the afternoon. Okay, so I'll show you a little bit of what we got. We already took out the conduit pipes and the connectors that we got from Lowe's out into the garden, but at the local nursery we got this tomato food for our tomatoes. I'm really trying to prevent any disease or anything this year, so I'm trying to make them as well nourished as possible. This we got from Lowe's. It was in the clearance section. It was $4. These two were in the clearance section for $1. It's Vinca's. And then this is from the local nursery. That's where I usually get my seeds. And this was $3.50. I've grown amaranth before, but not this variety, and I really like amaranth, and so I wanted to do that again. And then this was $6.99. My wave petunia came back from last year, but I really wanted a big large one for our deck area to overhang because we had a huge one there last year and it just looked so pretty, so I got that one. And then my lavender seeds, only one of them came up and I don't even know if it's gonna make it, so we got this as well. This was, how much was that? This was $3.99. This little prayer plant is an inside plant. This was $3.99. And then the citronella was $3.99 as well. We have mosquitoes really bad here, so I want to plant this out into the garden so when we're working at night, we can rub some of this on us. So this was all from the local nursery. These three were from Lowe's. Again, the 80-20 principle, do what you can where you can. That was the same with the conduit pipes. We wanted the 1/2-inch conduit pipes. We checked our local hardware store and they did not have 1/2 inch. They only had 3/4 inch. So we went to Lowe's and they did a discount. If you get 20 or more, then you get a 10% discount. So they ended up being $6 a pipe. Our comfrey plant has been out of control. It has taken off this year, and my mom has told me before that you can use comfrey soaked in water as like a tea or fertilizer tea. I decided to cut it today and put it into little buckets that we have. When we first started getting our food in bulk, we went to a local IGA and they gave us a ton of buckets from their deli counter for free. So if you ever need buckets, go to a local grocery store's deli counter. Since then, we've used a lot of these buckets out in the garden. I am just filling them up with as much comfrey leaves as possible, chopping them up and kind of roughing them up as I'm putting them in, and then filling it up with water and putting the lid on it, and we'll probably use it in about 30 days.
This looks really good. So these are the conduit pipes that we already had. And you can see we just put it in the ground, tie it up there, and then as it grows, wrap it around the tomato. And these are my indeterminate tomatoes, and they can get wild if you let all of these little starts grow off of them, and then this whole system doesn't really work as well because then you have to create more strings coming down and it just kind of gets out of control. So this year I'm trying to be really good at stopping this from growing into different ones. And these are the tomatoes that our kind neighbor gave us. They are an heirloom tomato that his brother, who has now since passed away, he has saved these seeds forever, and so our sweet neighbor man wanted us to have some of his plants that he grew from that same seed, and so he gave us this whole entire row of those. So that'll be really fun because he always walks our neighborhood, so we can show him the progress of the tomatoes that he gave us. This group over here, the tomatoes are just huge. They got so big. They were laying on the ground, so they were growing sideways. So I just strung up the bottom and letting them grow straight back up, and then I'll continue wrapping them. Like this one has already come back up. It was sideways last night. Same with this one. It was sideways and it's turned back up the right way so I can start wrapping it. And this one was also completely sideways and it's trying to turn back up. So I can probably go ahead and wrap that one as well. I'm also trimming off all of the lower branches to help prevent disease, because when water splashes on the ground and then they splash up on the leaves and they stay wet, that's when last year we had, I can't remember what it's called, but the leaves turn yellow and get spots on them, and it was terrible because then you have to keep cutting it off, and it really messed up our tomato yield last year. And so I'm trying to keep up with that. And then also I tried to prevent that by spacing them out a little better this year, so that way no leaves are overlapping each other.
So we are stringing up our indeterminate tomatoes, and then the determinate tomatoes are the ones you don't want to trim or cut because you have a limited amount of tomatoes that are coming from them, so you want them to bush out as much as possible.
Wow, are these the asparagus coming up?
Yeah, pretty good.
I'm shocked. How did you know?
Well, they look very different, so like it's either a little fir tree, which I like to cultivate.
You're hearing me talk to Scott about the asparagus rows. So I had soaked asparagus seeds, and I've heard asparagus is very hard to grow from seed, but I had the seeds, so I thought I'd give it a try, and planted them probably a month ago, and didn't think anything was going to happen from them because nothing was coming up. And to my surprise, they had come up, and Scott weeded the bed, and thank goodness he recognized that they were asparagus and not weeds in this bed. When we had our Kentucky land, we bought all kinds of these small little cages, and we had enough for our 2 rows except for 4, but for some reason in our mind we thought we only needed 2. So when we were at the local nursery, they had the big ones for $7.99, the cages. We decided just to go ahead and get them from the local nursery because we would rather give our money to them than Lowe's when we can. And it was really cool because when we went to Lowe's, and theirs was more expensive than the nursery. So that was really cool. Sometimes it pays off to give your money to your local place because it ends up being the better deal.
I have to share something so cool. I was tempted to go to the store today to get potatoes for our roast, but I was like, you know what? Let's just use what we have. So that's why I was going to do carrots and possibly doing beets and then kale chips. And we decided, so these are our potatoes from last year. We obviously missed digging up last year. They came up this year, and we were just going to leave them, but then I planted all of this. Wasn't supposed to be a tomato row, but I had so many tomatoes that it became a row. And you just asked me if we were supposed to plant them together, and I was like, nope, you actually should not plant them together because they have the same diseases and stuff. So we pulled one out.
Look at that.
And look at that. So we're going to pull out the rest of them. God has provided potatoes for us. So cool.
This was so much fun digging up these potatoes. For some reason in my mind, I didn't think they would be very big or that there would be very many. And we were going to dig these up earlier in the spring because this area was a garden last year, but it looks totally different this year because we did rows and wood chips. But these just came up on their own, and they were kind of on the edge of the pathway, which we didn't love, but we thought, you know what, if there's potatoes here, we might as well just leave them so we can get a harvest from them. And so when we decided to just pull them up, it was so fun to see the amount of potatoes we got from these.
The worms are like in an uproar.
It's funny when they come up when you pull grass with things.
Like, what's happening?
It just immediately reminded me of Lisa Graham McMinn's book. I think it was her book, The Contented Soul. She talks about how we live in a society that doesn't put limits on yourself. If you want something, you go get something. If you need something, then you can have it the next day if you want it. And ever since I read that book in 2019, that has always stuck with me, that when we put limits on ourselves, it actually gives room for God to show up for us. And then it's so much more rewarding. Like eating these potatoes for dinner was so rewarding because we were going to do without them. We decided not to go to the grocery store, not to go buy them, but just to use what we have. And we were going to be happy and content with that. and then to all of a sudden dig up potatoes. It was just so cool. It's always a good reminder that it's okay to put limits on ourselves. We don't need everything that we think we need. We can practice contentment, and sometimes God will show up in really cool ways and actually give us the desires of our heart.
That's a nice little hole.
Good, was provided. This looks good. I'm so grateful that you said to hold them up. It also looks a lot cleaner.
It does.
Looks really good.
Joyous to watch when long after my evenings recliners or pods or television required. Give me two players like Gibson Park and Ponte Roll to just watch every Saturday. Good soundtrack. Good soundtrack. One stop podcast.
How the AC walls looking. How the morning glory walls looking. I just put this plant here. I transplanted it from our garden over here because I really like the way this ivy looks. Put it on there. Let's see what it does. And here is dinner. Nice and crispy kale chips. The only way to eat kale.
In one day, we were able to get up all of the pipes and hang all of the twine down. Some of the tomatoes are a little too small to tie it to the bottom, but the ones that were big enough, I went ahead and started wrapping them around so they can start growing up the string. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I bless the rest of your day.